Hello, this is Tom Masters, longtime fan and listener of the podcast, and you are listening to Tale of the Manticore.
The following podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Tale of the Manticore, Season 3. Like the creature from which it takes its name, Tale of the Manticore is a mashup, a crossbreeding between two different species of storytelling. Here you will find the unpredictability of old-school paper and dice games with the storycraft of a dark fantasy novel. No character is sacred, and none will be spared if the dice decide their fate is at hand. According to lore, the tail of a manticore is barbed with cruel iron spikes. There will be much pain in the days ahead. Last time on Tale of the Manticore. In Chapter 8, the party leaves the giant centipede's cavern through a newly discovered exit. The orcs, still guarding the spot where they entered some distance away, are evaded with ease, and the party members once again find themselves traveling. They hope to reach Dureni's home in the Setevi Marsh before hunger and thirst begin to truly threaten them. By the time they do reach it, they are suffering, and while Dureni says he cannot bring Achillea the rest of the way, he does manage to find water and some edible plants for her to consume while she awaits his return. When she sees him again a few hours later, he is not alone. One of the tribe's elders has come to meet her. This elder, Valkeen, has a lot of questions, but he also brings an answer. He has recognized one of the places in Audok's sketchbook, and while he doesn't know the artist, he is able to tell her how far to the north she needs to go in order to find it. That's not the only good news. He has also given Dureni permission to escort her there. After Valkeen departs, Dureni tells Achillea that he has a surprise for her. It turns out to be a person who arrives at their camp after nightfall. Chapter 9, Part 1, Day 9, Midnight. Mythic event meaning: negligence, weather. Party status: Achillea, 4 out of 4 hit points. Cord, 6 out of 6. Dureni, 6 out of 6. Supplies: the companions have 20 portions of food and 14 of water. Spells available: Achillea has memorized Shrink. Despite the bright moon, it was dark where they were sitting at the pond's edge.
"Here he comes,"
announced Dureni, getting up. The approaching figure was but a shadow moving among the rushes.
"Here who comes?"
asked Achillea, also rising to her feet. Now she could see the stranger's face. It was another elf, younger than Dureni, but similarly appointed with sword and bow.
"The newest member of our group,"
replied the other.
"My little brother."
When the newcomer entered their camp, Dureni stepped forward and met him with an embrace.
"Did anyone see you leave?"
"No one,"
replied the other, grinning.
"You're certain?"
"Do not worry. They won't realize I'm gone until late morning, tomorrow. By then, we'll be miles away."
"I am so glad to have you with us, my brother,"
said Dureni. He turned to the others.
"Cord, Achillea, this is my brother, Tentir."
Cord bowed stiffly. Achillea waved and said,
"I'm happy to make your acquaintance, Tentir. I am also grateful for your company as we travel, but I do not want to cause any trouble between you and your tribe."
Tentir was looking at Achillea and Cord with unconcealed wonder and excitement. Not for the first time in the past week, she felt self-conscious, as if there was something wrong or strange about the way she looked.
"Be at ease. There will be no trouble,"
replied the young elf, mistaking the source of her discomfort.
"I've left a note with my parents. They wouldn't have let me come, had I asked, but they won't come after me. They wouldn't stop me from helping the person who saved my older brother's life. My thanks for that, by the way."
Achillea blushed in the dark.
"Come then,"
she said.
"Let us all sit together and talk."
Just like that, we have a fourth member in the party. I won't say he's the final member, as that would tempt the dice gods. Tentir is Durrani's younger brother. He's 45 years old, barely more than the equivalent of a teenager in human years, and his personality is quite different from his older sibling. Before I get into that, I'm going to go ahead and roll him up. Let's begin. For strength, I've got a 10. Intelligence. 10 again. Wisdom. Ooh, a 6. Oh dear. That's going to come with a penalty. -1 on saves versus spells. I suppose it makes sense, though. Tentir did just essentially run away from home, after all. He's reckless and a little inconsiderate. Dexterity. 13. Well, here's a bonus. +1 to AC and in using missile weapons. Constitution. I've got an 11. Charisma. A 14. You know, his stats are remarkably similar to his brother's. And I think Tentir is probably of the same class, a fighter, so he'll have 6 starting hit points. This is where his similarity to Durrani ends. Tentir's personality is quite different. Whereas his brother is reserved, Tentir is outgoing. Where Durrani is a planner, Tentir is a doer. I'm sure the nuances of both their personalities will clarify as the game proceeds. Speaking of which, let's get back into it. I'll just make the rolls for tomorrow's hex crawl before we do. For weather, 10, a fair day. For stumble upon, a 9, no special encounters. Will there be a wandering encounter on a d6? A 5 means there will be. Will it happen at day or nighttime? A high-low with high being day. It'll happen at night on day 10. I'll stick with my current wandering encounter table, but I'm going to double the chance to encounter orcs. Rolling a d8. An 8. What's that? Oh, okay. Well, that's going to take some thinking and some prep, but I'll do all that off mic so we can get back to the story. Chapter 9. Part 2. Day 10. Sunset. Mythic event meaning. Negligence, weather. Party status. Achillea, 4 out of 4 hit points. Cord, 6 out of 6. Durrani, 6 out of 6. Tentir, 6 out of 6. Supplies. The companions have 17 portions of food and 11 of water. Spells available. Achillea has memorized Shrink. The day was cool and overcast, and the party, now numbering 5, including Achillea, Cord, Robin, Durrani, and Tentir, covered a good distance by the time the sun completed its arc and touched the western horizon. Along the way, the landscape had consisted mostly of mixed, light woods, punctuated by stretches of grass-covered hills. As planned, they had veered somewhat to the northeast, and it now became clear, as the daylight turned into twilight, that Durrani was looking for something in particular.
It should be somewhere close.
He muttered for the 3rd time in the last hour, and then, finally...
Ah, there it is.
What do you see?
asked Achillea. Was Durrani's eyesight so much better than hers? All she saw was a thick line of dense and dark forest ahead.
Look up into the tree.
Durrani instructed.
No, not there. Over to the right and up.
Up?
Into the upper boughs. Do you see it?
Now she did. 60 feet off the ground, there was a wooden structure built right onto one of the trees. As they drew closer, she saw it was really just a platform of logs resting across thick boughs, with some large animal hides suspended from the branches above it, like a tent. Durrani put 2 fingers in his mouth and gave a trilling whistle. Robin, sitting atop Cord's head at that moment, gave an accompanying peep. A few seconds passed, and then an answering whistle came from up ahead, almost certainly from the tree platform.
Good,
said Durrani mysteriously.
Right.
Echoed Tentir.
My legs are tired.
A few minutes later, the companions found themselves at the base of the tree, a towering redwood with a trunk 3 times as thick as a man. Upon their arrival, a knotted rope dropped down from the structure above.
Youth first!
Exclaimed Tentir, and he dropped his pack before grabbing the rope. With arms flexing, he began to climb, straight up. Durrani held the rope steady for his brother during the ascent, and when he reached the top, tied Tentir's pack to the end of the rope. This was hauled up in due course, and then the rope was lowered once again.
Ready?
Asked Duretti, looking at Achillea.
I don't think I have the strength to do that.
She said. For an absolute fact, she knew she didn't.
Not a problem.
Replied the other. He made a loop in the bottom of the rope and tied a knot above it.
Put your foot in here.
She did, and soon found herself clinging to the rope for dear life as she was pulled up and up and up. At long last, she reached the platform. Tentir's hand reached down to grasp her under the armpit and help her up, and a second pair of hands received and steadied her. Achillea found her balance and then looked up into the face of another elf. This one looked like the brothers, but the face was older. It had a flat, low brow, a small nose, and thin lips. The skin was browned by the sun, and there were lines and creases around the eyes.
This is Berind. He's the Northern Sentry,
Said Tentir.
Berind, meet Achillea.
Baron smiled politely at her and did not make any sign that her appearance surprised him. Achillea guessed that Tentir had warned him in advance that she did not look as they did.
Well met, Berind,
She said. Then she made the mistake of looking down. The world seemed to pinwheel beneath her, and her stomach filled with butterflies. She couldn't help but let go a little cry, but Baron's strong hand reached out and steadied her once again.
It takes some getting used to,
He said, with empathy, though Achillea noticed that Tentir seemed as comfortable up here as he had on the ground. By now, the rope had been dropped back down, and Cord had his foot in the loop. A short whistle signaled that he was ready to be pulled up, and the three on top did so. Once Cord was up, and he too garnered no extreme reaction from Baron, the rope was lowered a final time, and Duretti climbed to the top, drawing it in after him once he reached the platform. Robin did not join them, and had flown off to get lost in the branches of another redwood. Baron's sentry platform was quite spacious, and the five of them had ample room. Achillea marveled that the logs making up the floor were not nailed down, but instead had been carefully cut and slotted into place, presumably with great difficulty, so that they held simply by force of gravity. Cord was extremely interested in the construction of the platform and spent some time looking closely at the various cleverly designed joints and fittings. We need to spend a few minutes and talk about Cord. I was thinking about his status as a player character and what that might mean for him over the long term. I've already decided that Robin, who is more or less a pet, will not really change over time. Perhaps as her bond grows with Achillea, the little taxidermied bird might one day be able to follow some basic commands, but that's about it. Cord is different though. He's fully sentient, and he can learn and grow. If I don't allow him to improve over time, a gulf will eventually develop between him and the other PCs that will make balanced gameplay difficult. So I've decided that Cord will level up, just like any other character. In Tale of the Manticore, I don't use experience points. Instead, I level up characters after they've survived a certain number of episodes. Getting treasure and defeating monsters is not a factor. The only requirements are that the character be part of the story and be exposed to some level of danger. Depending on the given class, the character's advancement occurs after 8, 9, or 10 episodes. That raises the question, what class, if any, is Cord? My first impulse was to treat him like a monster and simply raise his hit die every level. But then I had another idea. Hear me out. What if Cord was a druid? Not a real druid in the sense that he worships nature and receives power from a deity, but a creature with druid-like powers. Here's a bit of the class description from Old School Essentials Advanced. A druid gets a d6 for a hit die. No changes needed there. They're limited to a choice of club, dagger, sling, spear, or staff, but I don't see any reason why Cord can't keep his axe. Druids protect the land from both the forces of law and chaos. I don't think Cord has any such purpose. His powers come from being highly attuned to nature, that's all. So, what powers and limitations do druids have? At 7th level, they become immune to the charm abilities of fey creatures, and they can shape change. They cannot wear metal armor. They get a +2 bonus to saving throws versus electricity and fire. At 2nd level, they gain the ability to communicate with fey creatures. At 3rd level, they can, quote-unquote, pass without trace, moving through natural terrain without leaving tracks. Let's consider each of these points in turn. I'll keep the charm thing, but drop the shape change. Cord won't wear any armor, but instead has a natural AC of 14. Instead of a +2 bonus to saves versus electricity and fire, I'll say he instead has a -2. He is made of wood, after all. I like the ability to communicate with Fae. That might be interesting, but I'm foregoing the pass without trace power. I'm setting Cord's level up requirement at 9 episodes, so today he will achieve level 2. I won't bother rolling stats for him. I will roll for new hit points on a d6. A 5. Excellent. His new maximum is 11. Finally, as a second level druid, he'll get 2 first level spells. I'm going to roll for these at random instead of allowing him to choose daily. Rolling on a d8, he will get a 3. That's Entangle. Well, that's cool. And 6. Locate plant or animal. I'll rule that Cord must take one of each of these spells and cannot double up. I won't bore you by going into the spell descriptions at this point. We'll get to those when and if Cord actually casts them. And with Cord's character sheet complete, it's time to return to the story. It turned out that Baron's Sentry Treehouse consisted of not just a single platform, but several. There was a ladder built into the trunk of the redwood that went up to a second and third level. Baron pointed them out when Achillea asked where he kept his supplies. Dureni wanted to talk about the orcs.
I was captured by a scouting group.
He began.
Achillea saved me. If she hadn't come along, I'd be orc food by now.
Achillea blushed and said nothing. Baron seemed impressed, however, especially after Dureni explained how she had done it.
The orcs are far more active this year, and acting strange,
He said.
Usually, a warband will march southwest, passing through those grasslands there.
Baron pointed at the land Achillea's party had traversed to reach the spot.
You're lucky you didn't run into any.
Have they not already passed by?
Asked Tentir.
That's what's so odd. They've been sending parties in both directions. I can't tell what they're up to.
The group continued their discussion into the night, exchanging guesses and theories as to the orc's purpose. Eventually, Baron stretched and said he was going to sleep. He wished everyone a good night and climbed the ladder to the second level in order to make more room for the others. Achillea insisted on sleeping in the dead center of the platform. Even then, with 10 feet of floor in every direction, she feared rolling off in the middle of the night. She even considered tying a tether to her ankle, but, perhaps out of embarrassment, did not do so in the end. Before long, Dureni and Tentir were snoring softly, and she was alone with her thoughts. Trying to sleep so high in the air was a unique experience for her, as her body maintained a constant thrill simply from the altitude. And the air up here was different, almost pungent with the rich smell of the foliage. As she always did when she needed to calm herself, she meditated, allowing her breathing to slow and her mind to empty itself. Eventually, her eyes closed, and she fell into a deep slumber. It's time to make the rolls to see what day 11 will bring. For weather, an 11, so the mild weather will continue. For stumble upon, a 9, no result. Next is for wandering encounters. I need a d6 for this one, and I think as we go further north and the terrain changes to become less wooded, I'm reducing the chance for an encounter from 3 and 6 to 2 and 6, and still just rolling once per day. So a 5 or 6 on the d6 will indicate there is one. Here's the roll. A 6. Well, alright then. This time I'll determine the encounter details on mic. Rolling on my table gives me a 4. What's that? How interesting. More orcs. This part of Zacia seems to be crawling with them. I wonder what's going on. More rolls. Does the encounter happen in the day or night? Night. That also makes sense. And finally, will either side be surprised? A 1 to 2 on a d6 will mean yes. For the party. A 3 for the orcs. A 5. Neither side is surprised. So, how will all this look in the narrative? You know, I'm gonna need to step away from the game and sleep on this one. Chapter 9. Part 3. Day 11. Early morning. Mythic event meaning. Negligence, weather. Party status. Achillea, 4 out of 4 hit points. Cord, 11 of 11. Dureni, 6 of 6. Tentir, 6 of 6. Supplies. The companions have 17 portions of food and 11 of water. Spells available. Achillea has memorized Shrink, Cord, Concast, Entangle, and Locate Plants and Animals. In the morning, the companions broke their fast with food supplied by Berend, a cold broth of mushrooms and wild onions that tasted better than Achillea would have guessed and was quite refreshing. When it was time to take their leave, they descended the rope and then shouldered their packs as Berend lowered them. Achillea whistled for Robin, who immediately flew to her, and then, when the party was all together, they began the day's journey. They cleared Berend's woods sometime around noon, and then found themselves walking across an open landscape of scrub and crabgrass. Hills showing patches of bald rock dotted the landscape so that it rose and fell like an ocean of brown and gray. Along the way, Achillea casually asked Dureni how long Berend had been a sentry for his tribe. She was shocked when the other replied that he'd been their northern lookout for about 50 years. When she asked how old Berend was, Dureni guessed about 120 years, and Achillea was deeply troubled. She wanted then to ask Dureni how old he and Tentir were, but was too afraid to hear the answer and held her tongue. She was just 21. If it was true that she was a high elf, as the others had suggested to account for the difference in their appearance, how was it possible that Berend could be so old and yet look only of middle years? The kernel of identity crisis that now lived in the pit of her stomach seemed to double in size. She tried not to think about it, but she couldn't help herself. She stewed over the mystery and its implications for the rest of the day, growing quiet and sullen. She was still feeling upset when twilight came and the brothers began to look for a good place to make camp. But instead of finding a sheltered spot where they might be hidden from view, they found something very different. Thank you for listening to Tale of the Manticore, and Happy New Year! If you're enjoying the show and would like to help to support it, there are lots of ways to do so. You can recommend the show online or to friends. You can like and repost episode announcements on social media. You can pick up one of my products on DriveThruRPG. You can purchase a Tale of the Manticore t-shirt at www.beararts.store. And finally, you can rate or review the show on your podcatcher of choice. I'm grateful for all of your kind support. As you know, I love to read out your generous reviews of the show. This one was left by Selden RL 2016. Selden writes, "He's back. Looking forward to seeing the next adventure. Also, departure from how seasons 1 and 2 started." Thanks very much, Selden. It is different, that's for sure. But I'm all about experimenting, and I'm okay with taking a risk. My guess is that some folks will prefer this sandbox style, while others will prefer the tighter confines of Season 2, or the do-it-while-I-learn-how-to-do-it quality of Season 1. Horses for courses, right? It's all good. My favorite thing that you wrote in your review is that you're looking forward to seeing this next adventure. It's probably just a figure of speech, but I'm going to tell myself that the podcast actually makes you see the story unfold in your imagination. Hey, a writer can dream. Thanks again for the kind words, Selden. This episode features 3 voice actors. Kyelan returns in his role of Dureni, while Kevin Berenger, who played Jace in Season 2 and more recently voiced an orc for me, plays Tentir, Dureni's younger brother. If 2 elves aren't enough, there's a third in this episode. The Northern Sentry, Berend, is given voice by Maxime Lowe, aka Waxmole on itch.io. Thank you so much, Kyelan, Kevin, and Maxime. I've got such a great cast. If anyone out there is curious to learn more about Tale of the Manticore, I keep a blog where I post all kinds of show and RPG-related stuff. You'll find art, maps, tables, crafts, and show notes there. Check out taleofthemanticore.blogspot.com. To get in touch with me, I'm at Manticore Tale on X, Tale of the Manticore Podcast on Instagram, or taleofthemanticore@gmail.com. I reply to every message I receive. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you find adventure in 2025, and may you have a year where chaos rolls in the best way possible.